This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Mark Nelson. Oomphel in the Sky by H. Beam Piper. Part 3. When they emerged from the escalators, Alpha was just touching the western horizon, and Beta was a little past zenith. The ship was moored on contragravity beside the landing stage, her gangplank run out. The Shunoon, who had gone up ahead, had all stopped short and were staring at her. Then they began gabbling among themselves, overcome by the wonder of being about to board such a monster and ride on her. She was the biggest ship any of them had ever seen. Maybe a few of them had been on small freighters. Many of them had never been off the ground. They didn't look or act like cynical charlatans or implacable enemies of progress and enlightenment. They were more like a lot of schoolboys whose teacher is taking them on a surprise outing. "Bet this'll be the biggest day in their lives," Travis said. "Oh, sure. This'll be a grandfather story 10 generations from now." "I can't get over the way they made up their minds down there," Edith Shaw was saying. "Why, they just went and talked for a few minutes and came back with a decision." They hadn't any organization, or any place to maintain on an organizational pecking order. Nobody was obliged to attack anybody else's proposition in order to keep up his own status. The thought of the colonial government taking 10 years not to build those storm shelters. Fox Travis was commenting on the ship now. "I never saw that ship before. Didn't know there was anything like it on the planet. Why, you could lift a whole regiment, with supplies and equipment." "She's been laid up for the last 5 years, since the heat and the native trouble stopped the tourist business here. She's the old Hesperus, excursion craft. This sun-chasing trip we're about to make used to be a must for tourists here." "I thought she was something like that, with all the glassed observation deck forward. Who's the owner?" "Quanon Air Transport Limited. I told them what I needed her for, and they made her available, and furnished officers and crew and provisions for the trip. They were working to put her in commission while we were fitting up the 4th and 5th floors downstairs." "You just asked for that ship, and they just let you have it?" Edith Shaw was incredulous and shocked. "They wouldn't have done that for the government." "They want to see these native troubles stop, too. Bad for business. You know, selfish profit move. That's another social force it's a good idea to work with instead of against." The Shunoon were getting aboard now, shepherded by the KNI officer and a couple of his men and some of the ship's crew. A couple of sepoys were lugging the big globe that had been brought up from below after them. Everybody assembled on the forward top observation deck, and Miles called for attention, and finally got it. He pointed out the 3 view screens mounted below the bridge, amidships. One on the left was turned to a pickup on top of the air terminal tower, where the Terran city, the military reservation, and the spaceport met. It showed the view to the west, with Alpha on the horizon. On the right, from the same point, gave a view in the opposite direction to the east. A middle screen presented a magnified view of the navigational globe on the bridge. View screens were no novelty to the Shunoon. They were a very familiar type of Oomphel. He didn't even need to do more than tell them that the little spot of light on the globe would show the position of the ship. When he was sure that they understood that they could see what was happening in Blue Lake while they were away, he called the bridge and ordered up ship, telling the officer on duty to hold her at 5,000 feet. The ship rose slowly, turning toward the setting M giant. Somebody called attention that the views in the screens weren't changing. Somebody else said, "Of course not. What we see for real changes because the ship is moving. What we see in the screens is what the Oomphel on the big building sees, and it does not move. That is for real, as the Oomphel sees it." "Nice going," Edith said. "Your class has just discovered relativity." Travis was looking at the eastward view screen. He stepped over beside Miles and lowered his voice. "Trouble over there to the east of town. Big swarm of combat contragravity working on something on the ground. And something's on fire, too." "I see it. That's where those evacuees are camped. Why in blazes they had to bring them here to Blue Lake?" That had been EETA, too. When the solar tides had gotten high enough to flood the coastal area, the natives who had been evacuated from the district had been brought here because the native education people wanted them exposed to urban influences. About half of the Shunoon who had been rounded up locally had come in from the tide-inundated area. "Parked right in the middle of the Terran-type food production area," Travis was continuing. That was worrying him. Maybe he wasn't used to planets where the biochemistry wasn't Terra-type, and a Terran would be poisoned, or at best starved to death on the local food. Maybe as a soldier he knew how fragile even the best logistics system can be. It was something to worry about. Travis excused himself and went off in the direction of the bridge. Going to call HQ and find out what was happening. Excitement among the Shunoon. They had spotted the ship on which they were riding in the westward screen. They watched it until it had vanished from sight of the seeing Oomphel, and by then were over the upland forests from whence they had been brought to Blue Lake. Now and then one of them would identify his own village, and that would start more excitement. 3 infantry troop carriers and a squadron of air cavalry were rushing past the eastward pickup in the right-hand screen. Another fire had started in the trouble area. The crowd that had gathered around the globe that had been brought aboard began calling for Mayor Hilbeer to show them how they would go around the world and what countries they would pass over. Edith accompanied him and listened while he talked to them. She was bubbling with happy excitement now. It had just dawned on her that Shunoon were fun. None of them had ever seen the mountains along the western side of the continent, except from a great distance. Now they were passing over them. The ship had to gain altitude, and even then make a detour around one snow-capped peak. The whole 184 rushed to the starboard side to watch it as they passed. The ocean, half an hour later, started a rush forward. The score or so of them from the tidewater knew what an ocean was, but none of them had known that there was another one to the west. Miles' view of the education program of the EETA, never bright at best, became even dimmer. The young men who had gone to the Terran schools, who listens to them? They are fools. There were a few islands off the coast. The Shunoon identified them on the screen globe, and on the one on the deck. Some of them wanted to know why there wasn't a spot of light on this globe, too. It didn't have the Oomphel inside to do that. That was a satisfactory explanation. Edith started to explain about the orbital beacon stations on planet and the radio beams, and then stopped. "I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to say anything to them," she apologized. "Oh, that's all right. I wouldn't go into all that, though. We don't want to overload them." She asked permission, a little later, to explain why the triangle tip of the Arctic continent, which had begun to edge into sight on the screen globe, couldn't be seen from the ship. When he told her to go ahead, she got a platinum half-sol piece from her purse, held it on the globe from the classroom, and explained about the curvature and told them they could see nothing farther away than the circle the coin covered. It was beginning to look as though the psychological warfare experiment might show another unexpected success. There was nothing, after the islands passed, but a lot of empty water. The Shunoon were getting hungry, but they refused to go below to eat. They were afraid they might miss something. So their dinner was brought up on deck for them.